Hey, this is In Case You Wanted to Know. My name is John. In the room with me is Derek and our fine friend, Mr. Jim Henderson. How's it going, gentlemen?
It's going great, John. It feels like a Friday.
Splendid.
I don't believe it is a Friday, but for our purposes, we will say it's a Friday, and none of us will do anything for the next 2 days.
I have a friend that every time I see her, she says, "Every day's a holiday."
Life is an epic holiday.
And never a permanent vacation.
That's right.
Guys, what are we talking about today?
Well, I think people want to know what white glove transportation is, John. And Derek, you've done some research on the topic, and it's kind of a fairly big topic based on 4 or 5 years ago. There's a lot of interest in white glove transportation, and there are different parts to it, and there's some people see it differently.
Yeah. So on the commercial side, it's risk mitigation, right? So if you have items are of value to your business and you are transporting, whether it's moving an office, moving a restaurant, whatever it may be, a lot of companies will spend a little bit more money to, crate these items and wrap these items and make sure that they are hiring a company that has people that are trained and seasoned to be able to handle this stuff so there's not damages. Because again, the valuation of a business a lot of times is predicated on some of the assets that you have, right? And so
Sure.
it behooves the commercial side to make that investment. On the residential side, as we know, we talked in our last podcast about downsizing, and a lot of times family heirlooms, custom furniture, antiques, whatever it may be that is a family, item. Families want to spend the money, again, for the same reasons, to have these items taken care of, wrapped up, put inside of climate-controlled trucks and facilities. And so it behooves them to make the investment as well.
Yeah, so residential or commercial, it is, at the end, it's all about risk mitigation.
Sure. And that's the podcast right there. We can end.
Okay, thanks for joining.
There's obviously some traction with the words white glove transportation. Derek is our digital guru. He goes in and sees what the public is looking for. And one thing that I'm going to the audience, again, in case you wanted to know what commercial, when we're talking about commercial, it's lingo in the industry, meaning it's retail. It's something that is being sold by a manufacturer, or in our case, custom manufacturing. You order something that's specially made, and then so it's being sold through a designer, and then it has to be transported. So commercial transportation is the transportation of these items that are specifically built for high net worth and ultra high net worth families that are building or remodeling homes. And then residential, as Derek very well put, is the downsizing. People have spent, myself included, the last 30 years collecting things, and some people travel a lot. We've collected things that maybe don't necessarily have a great monetary value, but they have a sentimental value. And so now we need these items taken to another place in the country because we're downsizing, we're going to the small home, we don't have room for it. And so getting that item or a handful of items, like collectible items, transported is very important to know that it's being handled correct. So anyway, that's I think that what we're doing is trying to educate the general public, those that want to know what the industry is doing, and specifically in these areas of where it is important to have it done right.
Well, you mentioned the collectibles that you and your wife have picked up along your travels. Sure. And as you said, they may not have a high monetary value, but they have a high value to you. And that means that when it comes to moving them or how they're handled, they become high value.
Owls. Lots of owls.
We are pretty well known for white glove moving and storage. And there is a market for white glove moving and storage. But white glove transportation really brings it to singular type items, or a handful of items that you wouldn't be hiring a moving company, so to speak, because they're handling the whole household. And so now you get these very specific things like artwork, white glove art handling, white glove art transportation. specifically, how am I going to get those few items that a moving company's taking a whole household and they're okay with, the chairs and the couches and the dining room set and stuff. But I want to make sure that those items, these specific items, and maybe it's only a few, you're not moving these things to your new house. You're giving them to a family member. Or, like I said, you're building a new house or remodeling and you've ordered special custom-made couches that could be $10,000 or $15,000. And how do I get that into a truck and know that it's going to get to its destination properly? There's not enough to warrant a moving and storage company, but I need a truck. As a company, we see companies from the metropolitan areas, and it says specifically white glove transportation. And that's the part that's changing over the past few years that we see.
I think it's important for us too to get into, how do we execute a white glove move? Like, what does that entail?
Well, I think that's an important next part of the conversation, because one of the other things that we found over the recent years is that the term white glove is thrown around a lot. And unless a company, a service provider knows what they're doing, then white glove is just a way to sound like you know what you're doing. But there is a big difference between saying it and actually doing it, providing that level of service.
Well, I think what comes into white glove, I mean, there's this mental image of some people with white gloves on, right? White gloves on their hands, and they're handling something. They're picking up a piece of art or something. And so we see that and we associate the white glove with higher end people that know the difference, that aren't going to get their fingerprints on a very valuable piece. And these white gloves are designed to protect those items that are being handled. But a lot of companies in the industry, whether they're a moving company or a transportation company, have, as Derek said, there's a lot more search volume for white glove in Google searches. So, of course, enterprising companies in our industry are seizing on that.
Hey, you're a great big phony, you know that?
One of the things that I think, and again, John, you and I have been in this, we've been doing this 36 plus years. So we've kind of evolved into who we are. And a lot of that is about the experience. And we talked about in one of our podcasts about the length of tenure of staff here at our company. And I think that's probably the number one criteria for a white glove experience is experience with the staff, knowing what they're handling and how to handle it. And that's a differentiator. When a client or a potential client is inquiring for white glove, what's their experience in the field? How long have they been in business? And what's the vetting process? And we've seen the disaster stories.
So it's great that we've kind of established what white glove transportation is. Jim, can you talk a little bit about how, and not necessarily make an infomercial about William C. Huff, but what one can expect when it comes to hiring a white glove, transportation company? What does it entail?
Take us through what the client expectation of a white glove project is like.
I think the number one thing is the experience and the training, and those are important. But just because you have a white glove on or your website says you're white glove, it doesn't really mean necessarily that you are. So it's really about the experience of the company working with people who have things that are irreplaceable. So when you put those white gloves on and there is something behind it, you actually know what you're doing. There's a level of image that allows that client to feel comfortable, to feel like the experience is what they're paying for. Because typically, you're going to pay a little more money because you have this expectation of how it's going to go. It's going to go smoothly. Control from beginning to end is very important on white glove. White glove experience is all about the image, the training, the experience. Those are the three most important things to someone who has something they're willing to spend extra money to make sure it gets there.
So those are three important things. Everything in business and really in life comes down to strategy, people, process, and then obviously technology. Let's say a client comes in that has a heavy water fountain that they want moved. Can you explain what white glove transportation of that water fountain would be the execution arm, so that our listeners can understand that end of it?
Again, it comes back to experience. If they don't know how to pick it up, if they don't know how to put it on the truck, if the truck is an air ride suspension, it is the complete process. And all of the things I mentioned have to be part of that to ensure that client expectation is met from beginning to end. The separation comes from who shows up. You can market it all day long on your website. You can market it to, all of the right places, let's say the high-end realtors, or you can market, but it's delivery. It's how do you deliver that? And so again, we're talking about transportation, getting things. That means getting it from A to B, and A to B could be just across town, or in many cases it's across the country, across the continents. And being able to navigate all the things that go on in interstate or trans-world travel for items, you have to have a certain amount of experience.
So I'm standing next to and doing this podcast next to our crate area. And would said water fountain be crated as the strategy to make sure that it's isolated and not damaged in transit?
Yeah, for the most part, it would be. If there's value to it, there's sensitive parts that could get broken. If there's like it's a 14 gold carat plated and you can't scratch it or mark it. If the item weighs considerably more than the packaging around it, it could go right through the packaging. You could just wrap it. I've seen things wrapped just in cardboard and it's not good enough, or it might be just pad wrapped. And there are companies that say we have pad wrap. Well, pad wrapping something with a finish that if you just look at it the wrong way, it's going to get marred and it's going to devalue that finish. Then it really needs to be put in an environment, an appropriate crate where you don't touch the finish. A good example was we did an art collection for a fellow many years ago, but there was one particular piece of art that was three-dimensional, like the fountain that you're talking about. There was a lot of signs of wear and tear, but the finish itself couldn't be touched. But you needed to secure it because it was on a pedestal that was on a swivel, which is a no-no. You don't do that, but this person did. So now, not only did we have to secure it in a crate, the crate had to be such that it would somehow prevent this head. It was a tribal head made out of wood, and it was very fragile, that the pieces wouldn't fall off and the head wouldn't spin around inside the crate. And our training from Merv Richard showed us a way to secure the head from spinning using acid-free tissue paper, wrapping up and making it like a real soft rope.
Like a mummy.
Yeah. And so we secured it that way. And so the finish was protected from something hitting it, but the piece itself was protected from spinning and doing things that would have broken it. So experience is really important. Training is very important, professional training. And then, sometimes common sense, right?
And then moving on to people, the forklift operator has to be certified with running a forklift, right? And then from a process standpoint, obviously there's a process to get it lifted on a forklift, put on a truck, put into the truck, it's stabilized on the truck. And then from a technology standpoint, it's slapping a QR code on it and inventorying it. Right. And so,
well, tracking it is very important. I mean, in many cases, the client wants to know where it is in transit. I always send out these Christmas wreaths made out of oranges and grapefruit. I sent them from Florida up to family and friends in New England.
Just to irritate them, right?
And they actually, in UPS, will show you a picture of the package on the doorstep. So they'll do that for a $75 group of oranges and grapefruit. Then you would like to think that we could do the same thing in the transportation industry. And as of yet, that we don't really see that. Of course, we're not leaving something on a doorstep because that wouldn't be very cool. Somebody has to sign for the kinds of things. But as you trickle it down to, my wife and I collected little things, trinkets in our travels. My wife went to
Owls.
Africa a few times, several times with a group of nurses, and she'd bring back these onyx giraffes and water buffalo, just little wooden things. Didn't cost anything, but these are symbolic of a very important part of her career in helping others. So having something not expensive, but of value just sentimentally, either not be handled properly or get misplaced or something, just can't have that happen.
Well, that's one of the difficult positions that a client often gets put in, because as we've said, say I'm an uninformed client with high-end items, whether they be monetarily high value or just high value to me, sentimental reasons. I decide I need them moved from point A to point B. So I go online and I type in white glove moving, white glove transportation, what have you. And as you said earlier, Jim, I come across a website that says white glove. And I look at that and I say, oh, well, that's great. That's everything I need. And I make the phone call, set it up. They show up at the door, and it's guys in a graffitied truck that have no training, really don't know what they're doing. That puts the impetus on the client to do more research before they make that phone call, or make the phone calls, but don't commit. It's on me as the client to talk to friends, do my research online, look at reviews, because ultimately, if I agree to have a company ABC show up and they're terrible, well, I didn't do enough research to have comfort in that choice.
Right. Back to the white glove transportation. I think there's a real fine line between transportation, moving, and storage. And I think we can all see a lot of the freight forwarder companies, ABF, almost all of them that you see hauling regular freight, on the side of the trucks, they're advertising moving and storage now, that they will move your stuff. Putting your stuff in a freight truck is not a good idea if you value it. It's handled differently. The people that handle freight are going to handle your furnishings, your important pieces differently.
It's like toddlers.
What's that?
Toddlers handling their toys.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
And I've seen stuff be handled by, I don't know, freight
Toddlers?
companies. I won't mention names, but and they just put insurance claims in all the time because they just know it's going to get broken. And so none of them are advertising white glove yet. I mean, but there are a lot of white glove companies, by the way, transportation, trucking companies that will show up in a beat up non-air ride truck with people that are used to what they call dock to dock freight handling. But it just requires people with experience in how to handle it. That's the white glove experience that the clients want, and they don't necessarily know they're going to get it until the people show up. And that's where the people and the process are so important in what we do.
Or the people that watch this podcast didn't know that they wanted it, and now they do.
There's so many things that we've learned. And what's great about technology is we can share this stuff now. We can do these kinds of things. We can pull ourselves away from the busy, and people can find out about what's going on in this particular industry, because it's a massively big $400 billion industry right now because of all the downsizing baby boomers. And everything we talk about is going to be somehow connected to that in some way.
Well, I would say that puts about as neat a bow on it as you could ask for. Always good to see you, gents, and look forward to the next one.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Derek.